Welcome to the American Academy of Grief Counseling's Videogram on the loss of a child, the greatest nightmare. And this is a very somber topic because it is the worst type of loss an individual can experience. People who are not married or people who are not parents, fortunately, are spared this, but only because they're missing out on the greatest bond possible, and that's having a child. And there's no greater love than a parent's love for their child. And when that love is suddenly broken unnaturally and torn away, well, you can imagine the greatest grief possible occurs. And that's why we call it the greatest nightmare in this video, because no one who has a child ever wants to imagine such a thing occurring. Even thinking about it, maybe even watching the video in some regards, is a scary thought. So it's one of life's greatest losses, the loss of a son or a daughter. One of the primary reasons is because it's unnatural. It's an unnatural occurrence. It's not supposed to occur. Children grow up and they bury their parents later in life. It's not vice versa. So whenever a parent is at their own child's funeral, it is one of the most painful things for them to experience. And it's also a very somber thing for others to witness and to watch. And unfortunately, there's no magic cure. The pain, as stated, is forever. Now, there's different types of losses that can be experienced in regards to the age of the child. Loss of a young child is a terrible pain to lose a baby or a toddler of some way. And the sting is going to be different for this particular type of loss. The loss of the idea that you are, or one is a father, or one is a mother. So the loss of fatherhood or motherhood. And this is especially true when Father's Day occurs for those who've lost a child recently, or Mother's Day. They don't feel like they're a father anymore, especially if they don't have any other children. They don't feel like they're a mother anymore because they might not have any other particular children. And the sting of being reminded with every anniversary, but in particular Mother's Day and Father's Day, reminds these individuals of the great cross that they carry. Many things are also lost, maybe the first step, the first words, the first day of school. So while other families and parents are experiencing these wonderful things, parents who lose a younger child are always constantly being reminded through other individuals and their children's life and that future. And that loss of the future is something that never will go away. It is a constant cross on their shoulder through the rest of their lives. Some days might be a little bit better than others, but it is something that these parents have to learn to live with. And it's an unfortunate situation. Now, as we go up the ladder, some parents lose their children a little bit older, maybe in their teenage years. A lot of drunk driving crashes occur and parents lose their children this way. It doesn't matter what way, but it is still an extremely painful thing. And like any loss, there are certain stings that can go with it, which make it more complicated, maybe a little bit different than a younger child or a toddler. One listed here could be that children or teenagers, that is, might have had an argument prior with the parent before they died or were killed. Maybe the teen wasn't meeting standards and the parent had to be hard on them, or they had a disciplinary action taken against them. So the parent might feel a lot of guilt for maybe being too hard on them or for being upset at them. For instance, maybe after taking a shower, they leave all the towels on the floor. It's classic teenager. They leave the lights on in every single room. They do little things that annoy us. And then the parent feels immense amount of guilt because he would, or she would, the mother or father, would die just to see those lights on again, or to have those towels on the floor again. And this is an unfortunate guilt and it's something that they beat themselves up over. And maybe it is a little bit of a perspective on how we can handle daily problems with our teenagers, but it doesn't mean that they were wrong in disciplining or yelling and telling them, hey, pick this up or turn this off. But this is the type of guilt that starts to sink in with some of these parents when they lose a teenager. Also, loss of future events that are teen related, prom, graduation, and then just the thought of potential future wedding. Now, in any type of major shock wave that can occur, a quake in a relationship, spouses can come across and become stronger through the loss, or they can become weaker through it. They can blame each other for the particular loss and so forth. So it is not uncommon to have a secondary loss of divorce between spouses when a child dies as well. And there are also issues with maybe other children in the relationship, a younger brother or sister, or an older brother or sister who might have felt a little jealous. Maybe the teen didn't die abruptly. Maybe the teen was in care over long term. Maybe it was a chronic condition, and the death was a gradual progression due to a disease of some type. It was a terminal illness, and the siblings maybe were jealous a little bit of the extra attention that their brother or sister was receiving. And after the death, they might also incur various guilt. And the whole family then has to come together, and they need to express these feelings, these emotions, to get them out into the open, to identify them, to discuss them, and to resolve them, so that the family at least can have a clearer view of where they need to go and how they need to properly support each other in that case. But there are many, many complications that can come with the loss of a child. The loss of an adult child is unique in itself as well. Yes, your child grew up, you witnessed many things, many successes, hopefully, achievements of your child, graduation from college, a wedding, and so forth. But the loss of an adult child, to think that it's less because, well, at least some might say you got to see your child grow up, to dismiss it, to disenfranchise it as that, is completely and totally wrong, because it's just as painful. It is not as easier or less horrible than losing a young child. It's just as bad, because that is your child, regardless of the age. So with this particular situation, you might have dealings with grandchildren. The children themselves might be grieving the loss of their parent. So as a grandparent, you come into the role of comforter and trying to make sure those grandchildren remember their father or their mother. You're constantly reminding them. You're constantly keeping them within the traditions of the family. But there might also be legal issues with a potential surviving spouse. A spouse might be giving potential grandparents they might have had with the paternal or the maternal grandparents. They might have had problems while the spouses were married, and this particular spouse may be bitter about the loss of their husband or wife, and they might be treating the grandparents differently and not allowing them to see the grandchildren. So there could be legal issues in this regard. There might even be legal issues regarding the property of the daughter or the son, because the spouse inherits everything, and there might be some things that the parent thinks should belong to them, such as the case as the ashes of their child or something in that regard. So in many ways, when a married adult, at least, dies or is killed, the parents are no longer the first surviving kin. Instead, it is the spouse. Now, if the individual adult child isn't married, these issues are not at all existent, as well as if they have no other children. But there still could be complications with the relationships prior to death with an adult child, whether they're married or not married, whether they have children or not children of their own. And these complications can also, again, bring forth guilt. So every situation that we're talking about so far is on the same level of catastrophic. There shouldn't be a comparison. Well, your son died, but at least he was an adult, or someone will say, well, mine was an infant. There is no comparing, because they're all equally catastrophic, all equally horrible, and there shouldn't be any type of comparisons. There's just different ways or issues that infiltrate the relationship, the dynamic of the loss due to the age of the child, or the adult child. In some cases, there's just different situations that revolve around it. Now, there's other issues, as we have listed on this slide. Some parents never know what happened to their child, missing child, and the issue of unresolved grief. And what a horrible thing to have your loved one go missing. And it doesn't matter who. It could be a parent, it could be an aunt, an uncle, it could be a cousin. But if it's your child who goes missing, and it becomes a cold case, and you never know what occurred to your child. Was your child kidnapped? Was your child murdered? And so forth. And every day you're hoping that that child is returned or is found, to the point where maybe after a year or two, you just want a resolution to it. You want to know, is my child dead? Can I go forward with a funeral? What can I do? How can I know that my child is at peace, or how did my child die? And this is probably the most gruesome form of mental torture that can possibly exist. And if you're a parent, you can only just go into that thought process, probably a scary place for maybe a minute at most, and want to escape the fear that comes with the thought of a child of going missing and having this type of unresolved grief, and the pain that goes with the family for the next 25, 50 years of not knowing what happened to your missing child. Other issues are also of how was your son or daughter killed. So a child could die a certain way. Maybe it was sudden, maybe it was terminal, as we talked about earlier. If it was an adult child, was it suicide? Was it a DUI? Was it murder? So these other things add other dimensions, again, to the nature of the loss. Now, some individuals lose their children before the child is even born or able even to breathe his or her first breath. And these are cases with miscarriage and stillbirth. Now, miscarriage especially is sometimes the silent grief, the isolated grief, where a parent who's been maybe trying to conceive, and they weren't able to, and they finally did, they have a miscarriage, or even a parent who was able to conceive, and a woman now has the baby maybe for 3-4 months, and they're beginning to hear heartbeats, and they're beginning to do sonograms, seeing if it's a boy or a girl, a reveal party, and so forth. And then something happens, a miscarriage of some sort. And miscarriages can be very painful because it is the loss of a child. While society might not see the legal rights of that particular human person, that person still existed within the womb, and there was a connection, especially families who are much more maybe spiritual, and in their respect to the right of life itself. And with a miscarriage, a lot of times the woman doesn't even know, and the child is discarded, and there was no chance to have a burial of any type. And without society acknowledging that a life was lost, without that funeral, without that ability to resolve grief, many individuals suffer forward from that moment. And it's not just the woman who suffers, but also the husband or the partner who is with this individual, and they suffer together. And sometimes they only have each other, or the woman who is carrying has only herself and no one to talk to about it. Stillbirth would be another type of nightmare where the child comes to term and the child dies at birth, or is born not alive, not breathing. And this can be very, very traumatic. And in a lot of my studies of it, It's very important, and many hospitals disregard this, but it's very important, at least in the past, they disregarded it, for the mother to be able to hold the lifeless baby. And a lot might say, well, that seems kind of morbid or gruesome, but it does allow that little bit of bond to take place, to witness the death, to acknowledge the death, and to show love for that individual who was with the mother for 9 months or so. So that's an important thing that I think needs to be really considered when stillbirth or a loss of a child at birth actually occurs. And in the past, we tried to protect people from facing death and loss. And what we've learned in grief counseling is the best thing is to allow individuals to experience the loss, to acknowledge the loss, and so forth. So how to help in all of these horrible, again, nightmare, catastrophic situations. And the best way is to accept the pain and to sojourn, to walk with the individual, to listen, to be there. No gesture or comment's ever going to bring your son or your daughter back. They're gone forever, unfortunately, at least in this fallen world, they're gone. For your spiritual, there is hope for reunification later in life. But in the meantime, life is going to be a cross. You're always going to suffer from this pain. There is no resolution. There's acceptance. There's finding meaning in the loss itself and finding strength to move forward. But there is no ultimate explanation for the loss. There is no cure for the pain. And you wouldn't want that, because the bond between parent and child is so strong that when that bond's broke, that great love can only continue to exist in the form of grief because of the absence of that child. So it's best to sojourn, to listen, and to hear the story, to let them talk about their child. In time, they might even have a smile when they talk about their child, whether it was an adult child, a teenager, or so forth. But that pain is so real that it can never be escaped. Peer groups help quite a bit. There are groups for parents who have lost children, and they can find a lot of compassion and assistance from other individuals who suffer the same pain. And that's sometimes the best way, is to not just talk to someone who is studied in grief, but someone who's actually experienced the loss of a child, who's gone through it. And these parents can find support, they can share conversations, and they understand each other. And that's why these types of peer groups are so critical for parents who lose children. They need to go out, they need to talk to other individuals who have suffered this way, and then they're better equipped to help others who will eventually also suffer the same catastrophic nightmare. So a loss of any child at any age is forever, and again, to emphasize, is a parent's worst nightmare. There's no cure for it. There's only listening and understanding that this loss is catastrophic. If you'd like to learn more about the American Academy of Grief Counseling, we offer a 4-year certification that you can earn. You can go through the 4 core courses at your own speed, your own pace, to earn that 4-year certification. It doesn't take 4 years to complete the actual courses. You can go at your own speed, but once you've completed the 4 online courses, you can then apply if you meet the qualifications to be certified in this field. Below that, we have a link to the grief counseling page. It'll have all of the details that you might need. And we also have listed here our phone number at 330-652-7776. Again, that's 330-652-7776. You can also email us for information at info@aihcp.org. Again, that's info@aihcp.org. So this is a very sad video, a very sad topic. If you want to learn more about this, then I highly recommend following up with reading on these materials or attending these peer groups to hear the stories. If you've already unfortunately might have lost a child. I don't think anything can console you, but at least you know that there is information out there and videos out there that acknowledge your loss and understand that it is a loss that you're never going to get over. And we appreciate the love that you have for your child, and we know that love will never die. And we just hope as days go by, you're able to at least every now and then have a smile until that one day you're able to be reunited with that child. Thank you for listening, and have a good day.